Falling off the rooftop with the bully, we unexpectedly time-traveled. We transmigrated into ancient palace maidens. The tyrant has a strange personality, moody and unpredictable. They unanimously decided to push me out, making me the first to face death, no, to serve the emperor. But they didn't know that 3 years ago, they pushed me down the stairs, leaving me in a vegetative state, and I lay in a hospital bed for a year. Back then, I had traveled through time once. I knew this imperial palace all too well, but now, a decade had passed here, and everything had changed. I planned to find the little eunuch who had once huddled with me for warmth. With his cleverness, he should have risen to become a minor chief steward by now, but before I could even begin to act, the bullies discovered me. They dragged me before the emperor. Trembling, I looked up at the tyrant, and with just one glance, I froze in shock. Little Yuzu, hello, everyone, welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now the story begins. Upon hearing that I was chosen to attend the emperor tonight, all the selected maidens in the room breathed a sigh of relief. Thank goodness, I've survived another day. Their joy lasted only a moment before they frowned again. Someone couldn't help but curse aloud. I can't stand this damned place any longer. How on earth do I get out of here? Tonight she dies for us. But what about tomorrow, and the day after? I can't take it anymore. One of them rushed forward and slapped my head. It's all your fault. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have fallen off the rooftop and ended up here. She was nearly breaking down, punching and kicking at me. I could only hold my own head to minimize the harm, having been bullied for years. I've gotten good at taking a beating. The leader stepped in and stopped her. Stop hitting her. If you leave marks on her face or body, that tyrant will blame us. And none of us will survive. They glared at me fiercely before walking away. The atmosphere in the room grew desperate and tense. I huddled in the corner, watching them, yet an indescribable sense of satisfaction welled up inside me. Before, they were nobler than me, but now, everyone is the same. I am now a newly entered palace maiden, but just yesterday, I was a student at Jinshio High School who had just finished the college entrance exams. Throughout the 3 years of high school, I was bullied for 3 years. Bullies took unflattering photos of me and used them to threaten me. After the exams, they lured me to the rooftop, sneering with ugly grins. Don't think just because you've graduated, we can't do anything to you. I heard you're applying to University A. Do the students at University A know you once licked my shoes like a dog? Duan Yuan shoved her phone in my face. What? Too scared to even open your eyes and look? The college application system hasn't closed yet. Go change your application. She patted my face and said it as if it were nothing. You should be grateful to be going to the same university as me. Even after graduation, they still didn't want to let me go. I held my head in my hands, their menacing smiles before my eyes, and in my mind, the video they played on their phones, the one where I was forced to abandon my dignity. Rage overwhelmed my reason. I thought, why not just die together? I rushed towards them, holding them as we all tumbled over the railing, falling from the rooftop. But unexpectedly, when I opened my eyes again, we had arrived here. We became palace maidens in ancient times. The 4 of us were all in the same room. After the initial shock and despair, they had no choice but to calm down and start seeking a way to survive. But the more they inquired, the more alarmed they became. This was a fictional world, not part of any dynasty we were familiar with. The current emperor, Yuan Yu, is a gloomy and tyrannical ruler. Serving him in bed is no different from marching to one's death. Duan Yuan and the others tacitly pushed me forward, making me the first to go to my doom. Outside, the sky gradually darkened. I stole a glance at the window, which wasn't closed tightly, and the evening breeze blew in through the gap, and in front of the window, a lamp was placed. The candle flame flickered, now bright, now dim. Fire, there's a fire. The palace of gathered elegance is on fire. Someone, come quickly. The palace of gathered elegance was thrown into chaos as eunuchs and palace maids hurried over with buckets of water. Duan Yuan coughed violently, her entire face blackened by the smoke. She was dragged out of the room by the eunuchs and collapsed on the ground, gasping for a long time, and I took advantage of that moment to secretly change into a palace maid's outfit and slip away. An unfamiliar dynasty, an unfamiliar place. I navigated the vast imperial harem with practiced ease, eventually finding a hidden dog hole in the corner of a wall. crawled out on the ground. Du and Yuan and the others didn't know that 3 years ago, they had played a prank on me, causing me to fall down the stairs and become a vegetable for a year. Because their families were well off, with parents who were successful and influential figures, the incident was ultimately ruled as my own carelessness, and I had to accept the misfortune. Back then, I had already crossed over. I've been lying on a hospital bed in the real world for a year, and in this imperial palace, I've served as a maid for 3 years, trembling with fear, not daring to make a single misstep. Fortunately, I met a little eunuch. His situation was even worse than mine. Every day, he didn't have enough to eat or wear. His whole body was as thin as a monkey. Only his eyes were dark and bright. I couldn't bear it. So I secretly saved half a steamed bun for him at every meal. As we spent more time together, this gloomy young man was willing to speak a few words with me. He said he worked at Underling Pavilion. That place is the cold palace. No wonder he was treated so poorly. But I found that this kid is very clever. He would subtly provoke the palace maids and eunuchs who bullied him. He would pretend to be possessed by spirits, making the guilty-hearted eunuchs take the initiative to bring him food. By following him, I also managed to get quite a few tasty treats. We 2 lowly servants at the bottom of the palace hierarchy huddled together for warmth, and life became much better than before. Just when I thought life could only get better and better, I stumbled upon Xiao Yu's secret. That day, I was lucky. The noble was in a good mood and rewarded me with a few pieces of pastry. I had never seen anything so exquisite, so I carefully ate one piece and wrapped the other in a handkerchief. Intending to give it to Xiao Yu, I took advantage of the darkness to run to Underling Pavilion, but I couldn't find him anywhere. As if guided by some unseen force, I wandered to the backyard and finally spotted Xiao Yu's figure in front of an abandoned well. He was throwing a person down the well. Under the moonlight, his face was splattered with blood, a calm expression revealing an underlying madness. The pastry I was holding fell to the ground. The slight noise startled him, and he abruptly turned his head to look. After recognizing it was me, his expression suddenly turned strange. His fingers hanging by his side trembled slightly as he stared straight at me. I hesitated for only a moment before rushing forward. Leaning over the edge of the well, I saw the dead person's face clearly. It was the minor chief eunuch in charge of miscellaneous duties in the rear palace, a man known for his arrogance who had bullied others frequently. He was thrown at the bottom of the well, his body twisted. I steadied myself and pointed at the stone slab by the wall. Put that slab over it. I couldn't move it alone. So I cursed at Xiao Yu. What are you standing there for? He snapped out of it and slowly walked over. We worked together to cover the abandoned well with the stone slab, exhausted. I sat on the ground and looked up to see Xiao Yuzi studying me with great interest. Aren't you afraid of me? I shook my head. No, he must have bullied you. Xiao Yuzi looked at me and suddenly smiled. You, this person. My heart was pounding fiercely. I had lied to him. Actually, I'm afraid. I was afraid that if I turned and ran, he would catch up and kill me to silence me too. So I mustered my courage and rushed forward to help him dispose of the body. I buried this matter deep in my heart and treated him as always. He also seemed to remain the same quiet, meticulous little eunuch. The abandoned well at Underling Pavilion became our unspoken secret. Xiao Yu and I grew a little closer. Sometimes, in front of me, he would even smile occasionally. That kid is so clever, and ruthless too. After all these years, he must have secured a decent position. I have to go and ask him for a favor, see if he can come up with a way to get me out of the palace. This palace devours people. I really can't stay here any longer. I crawled out of the dog hole and ran all the way, but standing at the entrance of Underling Pavilion, my heart sank to the bottom. It was sealed off. Noble consort Qi, who had been confined here, had long since passed away from illness. I stopped a passing palace maid and quietly inquired about Xiao Yuzi's whereabouts. Upon hearing the name, her face immediately turned pale with fear. How could any eunuch in the palace dare to use this name? Isn't this a violation of His Majesty's taboo? Which palace maid are you? Don't harm me. She glared at me fiercely, then turned and walked away, leaving me stunned, frozen in place. I tried to make sense of what she had said, and a wave of regret washed over me. How could I have forgotten? Now this tyrant is named Yuan Yu, and since Xiao Yuzi offended his taboo, naturally the name had to be changed. What was it changed to? And where is he serving now? I know nothing at all. With my escape route cut off, I was like a headless fly, darting frantically through the palace. I hadn't run far before I was caught by the guards. The chief eunuch stepped out from behind the guards. He narrowed his eyes. Miss Song, where are you heading? I was taken back to the palace of gathered elegance. Duan Yuan and the others saw me and immediately crowded around. They flattered the chief eunuch to the utmost. Your Excellency, look. The fire in the palace of gathered elegance was definitely set on purpose. Song Wu is a man with sinister intentions, extremely dangerous. We nearly lost our lives in the fire. Your Excellency must seek justice for us. The chief eunuch looked at us with a hollow, insincere smile. His Majesty is aware of the fire at the palace of gathered elegance. He is in the mood tonight and wishes to conduct the interrogation personally. Ladies, shall we all go together? Upon hearing this, an eerie silence fell over the entire palace of gathered elegance. Duan Yuan's face turned pale, and she couldn't help but take a step back. We had learned of the tyrant's reputation from the original host's memories on our very first day here. I heard he has a peculiar temperament, as changeable as the weather. When he's happy, he might casually reward you with 1,000 taels of silver, but once he gets angry, he can just as easily chop off someone's head, and yet no one dares to advise him otherwise. In the court, the ministers who had both the qualification and the courage to speak out bluntly had almost all been killed by him. Duan Yuan and the others were eager for me to go to my death, and I myself was afraid to see him, but the chief eunuch couldn't be bothered with so much. With a wave of his hand, the guard stepped forward and pushed us out of the palace of gathered elegance. Our group of over a dozen people was led to the imperial garden. The emperor was drinking in the moon-viewing pavilion. He wasn't wearing his dragon robe, but a black brocade gown with wide sleeves, his hair loosely draped over his shoulders. His figure was slender, and his fingers, holding the wine cup, were long and well-proportioned. He lowered his head slightly, and we could only catch a glimpse of his smooth, pale chin in our peripheral vision. I didn't dare to look any longer, shrinking my head and kneeling on the ground. Some people around were already beginning to tremble. The tyrant asked indifferently, did a court lady escape during the chaos when the palace of gathered elegance caught fire? The chief eunuch replied in a low voice, yes. Where did she go? I wasn't sure if it was my imagination. But the chief eunuch seemed to hesitate for a moment before answering. The Jade Feather Pavilion. I have already taken people to bring her back. The tyrant's hand, which had been stroking the wine cup, suddenly stilled. The atmosphere around him abruptly turned gloomy. He lifted his gaze, and this time, not only the selected maidens, but also the eunuchs and palace maids attending nearby all knelt in unison. Your Majesty, please calm your anger. The chief eunuch looked at Duan Yuan. Weren't you so eloquent just now in the palace of gathered elegance? Why are you silent now? You'd better explain everything clearly and truthfully. Perhaps you might still keep your life. Duan Yuan's voice trembled. Your Majesty, spare my life. She raised her hand and pointed at me. It was her. She set the fire in the palace of gathered elegance, and she also took advantage of the chaos to break into the Jade Feather Pavilion. As her words fell, guards stepped forward and pulled me out from the crowd. They threw me to the very front. I knelt on the ground, not daring to lift my head. I thought to myself, I'm afraid I won't survive this. How should I say it to drag Duan Yuan and the others down to hell with me? As I was pondering, a corner of a dark robe appeared before my eyes. The tyrant had, at some point, stepped down from the pavilion. I heard him say, lift your head. I hesitated for only a second before hearing the sound of a sword being drawn behind me. In panic, I immediately looked up, meeting the tyrant's gaze. I froze. This face, Yuzu, in utter astonishment. My voice changed pitch. My shout made the eunuchs and guards around us all change their expressions. How dare you? Do you have a death wish? The chief eunuch turned pale with fear at my actions. He wiped away cold sweat and waved his hands frantically. How dare you disrespect His Majesty? Guards, drag this audacious woman away and beat her to death. I was stunned. Only then realizing I had just made a fatal mistake, my entire body froze, not daring to move a muscle, and the emperor, who should have been furious, froze just like I did. A few seconds later, he rolled his eyes, then he lowered his gaze to look at me. This time, his eyes were no longer lifeless as if looking at a dead person. but serious, with an inexplicable emotion as he examined me. The chief eunuch, observing his expression, stopped the guards from stepping forward. "Your Majesty, how do you wish to deal with them?" Yuan Yu composed his expression. "I'm in a good mood today and don't feel like killing anyone." Then, Yuan Yu lazily raised his hand and casually pointed a few times. "Take these few people to the Hanchun Palace. As for the rest, drive them out of the palace." He's quite good at picking. He accurately kept me and the other 3 bullies on the way to the Spring Palace. The eunuch leading the way said with a smile, "Don't look so down, young ladies. Now that you've entered the Spring Palace, there will be plenty of opportunities for you to rise high. If any of you catch His Majesty's eye, you'll truly be among the elite in the future." Among the elite, yet their lives are still in the Emperor's hands, having been here for 3 years. I've seen too many so-called nobles fall from the height of public adoration into the depths of hell. Their rise and fall entirely depended on the Emperor's whims and moods. This is terrifying. I remained silent, only quickening my pace to keep up. Yet the eunuch's words had taken root in someone's heart. "It seems we can't go back, so we might as well think about how to survive and live a good life." Jiang Minute came from the poorest family among the 3 of them and was also the most materialistic. She stroked the jade bracelet on her wrist. "On our way to Hanchun Palace, didn't we run into a Cheng concubine? Did you see what she was wearing on her head? All gold and gemstones. And her clothes were shimmering, as if embroidered with gold and silver threads." A look of longing appeared on her face. Duan Yuan mocked her. "Don't end up not even knowing how you died." Jiang Minute was a bit displeased. "As long as I don't bring trouble upon myself, I'll be fine. Besides, that tyrant doesn't seem so unreasonable. Yesterday, he didn't even kill her." As her words fell, their gazes all turned toward me. They were all puzzled, wondering how I could still be alive after causing such a disaster. I was also puzzled. The moment the words left my mouth, I already regretted it. My age, appearance, and voice were all different from those of the palace maid back then. They are completely 2 different people. If I were to say I had traveled through time or possessed someone else's body, Yuan Yu would probably have me executed on the spot. He once told me that he doesn't believe in ghosts or gods, isn't afraid of them, and doesn't respect them. I can't explain my identity or origins, and Yuan Yu, he is no longer the Xiao Yuzi I once knew. Since he could become the emperor, he definitely isn't a eunuch. He deceived me back then. How am I supposed to survive in this imperial palace? Does Yuan Yu still remember that little palace made from before? My mind is a tangled mess. I forcibly ignored the stares from Duan Yuan and the others. Now that we're in the same situation, they don't dare to bully me so casually anymore. So, I closed my eyes, ready to get a good night's sleep first. I might not even be alive tomorrow. The 10th day of staying in Hanchun Palace, a young eunuch came to the palace to announce the good news. He said that Yuan Yu had chosen Jiang Minute, telling her to prepare herself well. Jiang Minute felt a bit scared, yet also somewhat excited and thrilled. After the eunuch left, Jiang Minute went to dress up and put on makeup. Duan Yuan frowned as she looked at her. "Do you really think you're going to fly up the branch and become a phoenix?" Jiang Minute sneered. "What, jealous of me?" Duan Yuan let out a bitter laugh. "I'll consider whether to be jealous of you after you come back alive." After dark, Jiang Minute was carried away in a small sedan chair. Only the 3 of us remained in the Hanchun Hall. Another girl, Lin Xueyao, was somewhat envious of Jiang Minute. If she can truly please the emperor, will she be above us tomorrow? Perhaps she might even be granted the title of noble consort. Duan Yuan glanced at her but said nothing. After a while, she sent her away and then came up to me. "I have something to ask you." I looked up at her. "I remember, you were in the hospital for a year during your first year of high school. After you were discharged, you seemed a bit out of your mind for a while. You said it felt like you had traveled through time." Meeting her scrutinizing gaze, I asked, "What exactly are you trying to say? Have you been here before?" Her expression suddenly became agitated. "Your shock when you saw that Tyrant wasn't fake. You know him, don't you? You two have some kind of connection, right? How did you leave this place back then?" She has too many questions. I don't want to answer any of them, so I just looked at her with a half smile. "You're scared, Duan Yuan. I never thought the day would come when you'd be afraid." Her face flushed red, and her eyes widened. She looked ferocious. "Kneel and kowtow to apologize." and I'll tell you how to leave." Duan Yuan suddenly looked up, staring at me intently. Her face twitched slightly, clearly caught in extreme inner conflict. After a long while, perhaps the instinct for survival took over. I saw her legs gradually bend, little by little. She knelt down before me. "I'm sorry. What happened before was my fault." She bowed her head to me expressionlessly. I felt no satisfaction at all, after all. Just this much couldn't make up for the harm they had caused me, but I am a man of my word. Commit suicide, Duan Yuan. What, if you kill yourself? You can go back. Are you lying to me? She looked at me hesitantly. You're trying to trick me into killing myself to get back at me, aren't you? I smiled. Think what you want. I've told you the method anyway. Duan Yuan glared at me angrily and was about to say something more when the door was suddenly pushed open. Something terrible has happened. Lin Shuiao rushed in with a panicked expression. Seeing Duan Yuan kneeling before me, she froze instantly. Duan Yuan stood up, frowning at her. What's wrong? Speak up. Lin Shuiao snapped back to reality, pointing outside the Hanchun Palace, stammering, Jiang Minute is dead. By the time we went out, Jiang Min's body hadn't been carried far away. We caught up and saw the eunuchs carrying a woman's corpse, mangled and covered in blood. I mustered the courage to inquire about the cause of her death. The eunuch shook his head. I don't know. His Majesty only asked her a few questions before ordering her to be dragged away and beaten to death. We stood frozen in place, feeling a chill run through our entire bodies. In the following days, I didn't dare to remain idle. I inquired about Yuan Yu's background. Most people avoided the topic, but an old nanny who was about to leave the palace took my silver and told me a few things. His Majesty was once the fourth prince. His birth mother was Consort Qi. Shortly after giving birth to him, Consort Qi committed a serious crime, fell out of favor with the late emperor, and was confined to the cold palace. He was also implicated and became the least favored prince in the palace. He was sent to Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager was kind and amiable, but as the mistress of the harem, she had too many matters to handle daily and inevitably neglected the fourth prince. The old nanny didn't seem to be very afraid of Yuan Yu. Her tone and expression even carried a hint of pity. She said that Yuan Yu often sneaked out and lingered around the Kuiling pavilion. Sometimes he would disappear for several days in a row, and no one came looking for him, since being confined to the Tsuiling pavilion. Noble Consort Qi has become somewhat mentally unstable. She no longer recognizes people, not even her own son. Sometimes the fourth prince would sneak in dressed as a young eunuch to keep her company and talk with her. The old nanny paused. Later, the Jade Feather Pavilion caught fire one night, and Lady Qi perished in the flames. After that, the fourth prince seemed like a completely different person. He became diligent and studious, gentle as jade, and won the late emperor's favor with a flood control strategy. The old nanny didn't say how Yuan Yu became emperor, but from her hesitant expression, I guessed that his path to the throne must have been fraught with thorns and stained with blood. When asked about his preferences, the old nanny said, "I used to have some idea, but now no one can figure it out, and no one dares to even try." I thought for a moment, what about before? What did he like? The old nanny. In the first year after he ascended the throne, he often sat by a dry well in the Emerald Feather Pavilion, staying there for hours on end. Oh, and he used to love eating osmanthus cakes. I haven't made osmanthus cakes in a long time. I actually learned this back when I time traveled, secretly picking it up from a cook in the imperial kitchen. When I first started making them, I could never get the heat right. They always ended up either too sweet or completely bland. I took all those failed attempts to Tsuiling Pavilion and dumped the whole lot on Xiao Yu. He was eating a bit too fast and choked. I handed him water. "Tomorrow, I'll definitely do better tomorrow." He slowly finished all the osmanthus cakes, then looked up at me. "So eager to get into the imperial kitchen, do you also find this cold palace eerie and frightening, and don't want to stay here anymore?" I looked at him, then slapped him. "What are you thinking about?" "I just thought the imperial kitchen had more perks," I said, pinching his thin arm. "When I get into the imperial kitchen, I'll bring you some meat to eat. If you put on a little more weight, you'd look even better." He froze, and it was a long time before he lowered his head and chuckled softly. "You think I'm good looking?" "Yes, you're the best looking little eunuch I've ever seen in this palace." After trying a few times in the small kitchen of Hanchun Hall, I didn't forget this skill. Looking at the freshly made Osmanthus cakes, I turned away with satisfaction, but I found Duan Yuan standing at the door of the small kitchen, not knowing how long she had been watching me. "What are you doing? Does it have anything to do with you?" Duan Yuan remained silent, her gaze fixed on that plate of Osmanthus cakes. In the evening, a young eunuch came to announce the imperial decree. He said, "His Majesty has turned the plaque again. This time, it's Duan Yuan who is to serve the night." After the little eunuch left, Duan Yuan's face turned deathly pale, and she collapsed into a chair. Lin Shuiao looked at her with lingering fear. Time passed by minute by second, the last glimmer of twilight vanished at the horizon, and the entire Hanchun Palace fell into a deathly silence. The small sedan chair swayed as it carried Duan Yuan away. Lin Shuiao instinctively moved closer to me. Will she come back alive? I find it somewhat amusing as I look at her. You're asking me. She is taken aback for a moment. I wish all of you would die here. Lin Shuiao looks up in astonishment. She said urgently, the situation is critical now, and you're still hung up on past grudges. It was just minor conflicts. But now if we're not careful, we could really die. Minor conflicts. I thought she must be out of her mind. What you call minor conflicts is locking someone in the bathroom, forcing them to drink dirty water, taking humiliating photos of them and then mocking and threatening them. With each question I asked, she couldn't help but take a step back. Lin Shuiao's back hit a pillar, her eyes wide open, unable to utter another word. I took a deep breath. So, the sight of you disgusts me. I'd be overjoyed if you were dead. Lin Shuiao was left all alone, and she didn't dare to wander around in front of me anymore. In the blink of an eye, the person had vanished without a trace. I paused for a moment, then turned and walked toward the small kitchen. The Osmanthus cakes I had made this afternoon had completely disappeared without a trace. Duan Yuan was not dead, but being thrown into the dungeon. Life was worse than death. When the news reached the Spring Palace, I hesitated for less than a second before turning back to my room and starting to pack my bags. Duan Yuan believed I had a connection with him, so she stole the Osmanthus cakes I made, hoping to secure a way out for herself. But it didn't work. Yuan Yu shows no regard for old sentiments at all. Then I have no need to test my luck and court death. Since I can't leave the palace through official channels, I'll have to find another way. The imperial palace is vast, and the guards' patrols and defenses vary in strictness. I know an escape route. The chance of success isn't great, only 40%, but I have to try anyway. I finally waited until it got dark, but just as I was about to leave with my bundle on my back, someone grabbed my sleeve. Lin Shuiao looked at me with a panicked expression. "Are you leaving? Take me with you. Please, bring me along, otherwise, I'll call someone right now, and we'll die together." She was also frightened by Duan Yuan's fate. I resented her for messing things up. But the matter was urgent, and there was no time for lengthy deliberation. I warned her, "If you dare hold me back, I'll kill you before I die." Lin Shuiao didn't dare to speak anymore, just kept nodding her head. I ignored her and quietly slipped out under the cover of darkness, following the route I remembered. The night was as dark as ink, so thick it seemed impenetrable. I led Lin Shuiao, carefully navigating through the shadows of the palace. My heart pounded like a drum. Every footstep, even every breath, seemed unusually loud, as if it could attract countless pursuers. My memory of this path came from 3 years ago, when it was remote and sparsely populated, and the patrolling guards often did their duties half-heartedly, making it an unnoticed gap in the palace's defense network. But tonight, everything was tinged with an eerie unease. The further I went, the stronger that sense of wrongness grew. It was too quiet. Even the clamor of insects had vanished, leaving only the wind's mournful howl through the corridors, and in the distance, where darkness should have reigned, the faint glow of torches flickered, accompanied by the subtle clinking of metal armor. I abruptly halted, pulling Lin Shuiao, who was close behind me, into a recess of a rockery. The cold, damp stone pressed against my back, sending a chill coursing through my entire body. What's wrong?" Lin Shuiao's voice trembled uncontrollably. I covered her mouth, held my breath, and cautiously peeked out with half my head. Ahead, on the only path leading to the abandoned palace garden, where there should have been no one in sight, now stood at least 2 rows of guards holding torches and weapons. They stood solemnly with hands on their swords, blocking the way so tightly that not even a fly could slip through. How could this be? Why is this road suddenly under lockdown? Is it a coincidence? Or is it aimed at us? A sense of foreboding seized me, my heart plummeting wildly. Lin Shuiao also saw the scene over there. She gasped sharply, her body going limp, and only my support kept her from collapsing to the ground. Go back. She suddenly broke free from me, her face drained of color. Let's go back. We'll be discovered. We'll be killed. Like Jiang Minute, like Duan Yuan. I won't run anymore. I want to go back to Hanchun Palace. She was incoherent, her fear of death overwhelming everything else. She turned around, ready to retreat along the same path. As if returning to that gilded cage could offer her a fleeting sense of safety. Don't move, I hissed, reaching out to grab her, but it was already too late. Just as she turned and stepped out of the hollow, whoosh, a sharp, piercing sound tore through the deathly silent night. The sound was incredibly fast, incredibly sharp, carrying a chilling aura of death. I couldn't even see the trajectory of the arrow, only hearing a dull thud, as if a blunt object had pierced through something. Lin Shuiao's movements suddenly froze. She staggered, looking down at her chest in disbelief. A cold metal arrowhead was protruding straight from the center of her chest. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but only a stream of bloody froth gushed out. The terror in her eyes had not yet faded, yet her vitality was rapidly draining away. She collapsed limply forward, landing with a thud on the cold bluestone pavement. Lifeless, it all happened too fast. So fast that my mind went completely blank. My gaze shot upward, following the direction from which the arrow had come. On the palace wall not far away, a figure clad in black stood bathed in the cold moonlight. His posture was tall and straight, a massive iron bow in his hand, its string still faintly trembling. It was Yuan Yu. He was looking down with lowered eyes, his expression blank. His gaze was so cold and unruffled, as if he had merely swatted a bothersome fly, not taken a living human life. His eyes, passing over Lin Shuiao's still warm body, fixed precisely and firmly on me, hidden in the shadow of the rockery. Our eyes met. At that moment, it felt as if all the blood in my body had frozen, and even my breath came to a halt. Yuan Yu slowly lowered the iron bow and casually tossed it to the guard behind him. He stepped out of the shadow of the palace wall, one step at a time, and finally stopped before me, just an arm's length away. I stood frozen in place, unable to move even a fingertip. Surprisingly, he seemed to be in a rather good mood. A faint, almost imperceptible smile even played at the corners of his lips, a stark contrast to the cold ferocity with which he had just drawn his bow to kill. He leaned in slightly, drawing closer to me, his voice low and tinged with a tone of almost playful inquiry. Do you know a palace maid named Aishu? My heart suddenly clenched. How could I not know? Aishu, that was the name I used the last time I crossed over. Here, seeing that I didn't answer, he wasn't angry. Instead, he let out a laugh. He straightened up and continued on his own, as if merely recalling an amusing past event. She once swore to me that she had discovered a secret, undetectable way to slip out of the palace. She said that if things ever went south in the palace, she would take me with her and leave. Unfortunately, she broke her promise. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the stern guards around us, his tone light-hearted. So, after I ascended the throne, the first thing I did was send people to block that path she mentioned, inside and out, sealing it tight with heavy guards. Not even a mouse could slip through. I looked up in astonishment. Yuan Yu fixed his gaze on my face once more, his deep eyes swirling with emotions I couldn't decipher: nostalgia, scrutiny, and a hint of madness. Slowly, word by word, he said to me, "Long time no see, Aishu." The words struck like a thunderbolt, exploding in my mind. Did he recognize me? How could he possibly recognize me? This body, this face, not a single trace of Aishu from the past remained. I played dumb. What does your majesty mean? This servant does not understand. Before I could react, he had already lost the patience for reminiscing and waved his hand dismissively. Take her away, gently, don't startle her. Two guards stepped forward, supporting me from both sides. I had no room to struggle, like a puppet being led by them. Leaving this death-filled place reeking of blood, inside the hall of mental cultivation, Yuan Yu didn't kill me, nor did he resort to torture to extract information. Instead, He gazed at me for a long time with an inscrutable look in his eyes. Just as I was on the verge of collapsing, he seemed to grow weary or perhaps bored, and with a wave of his hand, he sent me to rest in the side hall. I felt as if I had been granted a great reprieve and was about to withdraw. Then I heard him murmur very softly, "Are you really that afraid of me?" My scalp tingled with fear, but I pretended not to hear and quickly walked away. I spent a sleepless night, enduring until dawn in a state of extreme terror and chaotic thoughts. Early the next morning, an imperial decree arrived directly at the Spring Palace. The chief eunuch came in person, his face wearing a fawning smile, his shrill voice ringing out loudly, "By the decree of heaven and the mandate of the emperor, it is proclaimed, the Maiden's song, endowed with a clever and wise nature, gentle and virtuous, has deeply captured our heart. She is hereby conferred the title of noble lady and granted residence in the moon-embracing palace, so ordered." I knelt on the ground to receive the decree, my palms drenched in cold sweat. The moon-embracing palace, that was a palace courtyard extremely close to the hall of mental cultivation, exceedingly magnificent. I have become Lady Song, from a palace maid who could be executed at any moment. I leaped to become the newly appointed noble lady of the rear palace, possessing an independent and magnificent palace. Duan Yuan is suffering a fate worse than death in the dungeon. Jiang Minute and Lin Shuiao have turned into cold corpses, while I have received favor and become a noble lady. An immense sense of absurdity and a deeper fear overwhelm me. What exactly does Yuan Yu want to do? Keeping me by his side is like keeping a living specimen that reveals his dark past, a plaything he can crush for amusement at any moment. On the first day I moved into Lanyu Palace, I felt restless amidst the unprecedented luxury and the prying eyes from all directions. In the first few days at Lanyu Palace, I was like a startled bird, where even the slightest movement would make me break out in a cold sweat. Yet, nothing happened. The days were eerily calm, the palace servants were exceedingly respectful, and all provisions for food, clothing, and daily necessities were of the highest quality. Yuan Yu did not come again, but rewards from the Hall of Mental Cultivation were sent from time to time. Sometimes it was clever folk mechanical toys. Sometimes exotic gemstones presented as tribute from foreign lands, but more often, it was all kinds of exquisite and delicious pastries. My tense nerves gradually relaxed, and I could at least get a good night's sleep in the Moon Embrace Palace. Later, Yuan Yu began to visit, always at dusk. When the setting sun dyed the sky a warm orange hue, he never lets anyone announce his arrival, always appearing silently and startling me. He never mentions the matter of sharing the bed, only asking me to accompany him for meals. The food is laid out on the stone table in my courtyard, and he eats quietly, occasionally asking me a question or two like, "Does it suit your taste? Or are you used to living here?" in a tone as plain as an ordinary household's greetings. After the meal, he sometimes rests for a while on the recliner in my courtyard, watching the palace servants light the lanterns under the corridor. Saying nothing, I stood nearby, or sat at a distance. The atmosphere strangely peaceful. As time passed, I even began to harbor an illusion, as if the tyrant who had shot Lin Shuiao with an arrow, that gloomy and unpredictable man, was not the same person as the one quietly eating before me, occasionally lost in thought while gazing at the stars. My wariness slowly wore away, day after day, in the monotony, until that day, he came again. After finishing his evening meal, he suddenly spoke, his tone unreadable. "Can you cook?" I forced myself to remain calm. "Your Majesty, I know a little, but I cannot compare to the masters of the imperial kitchen." "No matter," he said lightly, "make a portion of Osmanthus cake for me to taste." I could not refuse. When I presented a plate of not quite perfectly shaped Osmanthus cakes before Yuan Yu, he picked one up, examined it carefully, and then took a small bite. He chewed slowly, then slightly furrowed his brow. "It's too sweet." He put down the remaining half-piece, his tone indifferent. "It's cloying, not as good as it used to be." Perhaps the recent days of peace had dulled my senses, or perhaps his disdainful tone sounded just like the picky little you from back in the day. Almost instinctively, I blurted out a retort, "Impossible. The amount of sugar and the steps are exactly the same as before." The words were out of my mouth before I froze. The courtyard was eerily silent. with only the rustle of leaves in the wind and the pounding of my heart like a drum. Then, I heard a low chuckle. The laughter rose from low to high, carrying a kind of near-delighted, finally fulfilled exhilaration. Yuan Yu laughed, his shoulders trembling slightly. He laughed for a while before slowly stopping. He stood up, approached my stiffened body, and said in a tone full of smugness and mockery, "See, the fox's tail is showing now, isn't it?" I opened my mouth, but couldn't utter a single word in my defense. Yuan Yu said in a light tone, "Aishu, look, you're just as foolish as you used to be." Yes, foolish. He tricked me so easily with just a casual bluff. "Tell me," he said, settling back into his chair and looking at me with leisurely composure, "what exactly is going on here?" I know I can't hide it any longer, so I was forced to painfully admit that absurd and bizarre truth. I am Aishu, yet not entirely Aishu. I come from another world. Yet I once spent 3 years in this world's imperial palace, keeping each other warm when he was still just little Uz. This story is absurd, but it is also very brief. After I finished speaking, Yuan Yu nodded and asked, "Is that all?" "That's all." He stretched lazily with a relaxed expression. "Then I shall take my leave. I have court to attend early tomorrow morning." I was somewhat surprised. "You believe it just like that?" "Yes." He looked at me. "Aishu has never lied to me, has he?" After confessing my identity, Yuan Yu's attitude toward me remained the same as always. Our interactions felt as if we had returned to those 3 years in the cold palace. Sometimes I even thought to myself, with good food and drink every day and no one to bully me, staying in the palace to keep him company didn't seem so bad after all. In places I didn't know, the palace servants were all saying that His Majesty seemed less cruel and bloodthirsty lately. Especially after just coming out of Lanyu Palace, some even saw His Majesty smile. And also, a little eunuch was so nervous that he accidentally spilled some tea. Noble Consort Song casually said something, and His Majesty actually didn't punish him. Noble Consort Song enjoys His Majesty's exclusive favor. These words spread wider and wider among the palace servants. The servants working in the moon-embracing palace also became increasingly attentive to me. One day, a palace maid knelt before me in a panic. "Your Highness, please save me." Her eyes were red from crying. "I have a sister who serves in the imperial study. She accidentally offended His Majesty and is about to be dragged away and beaten to death. I beg your Highness to save her life." I was taken aback. "So, what exactly did she do wrong?" The palace maid lowered her head guiltily. "It was just a small mistake caused by carelessness." As we spoke, someone came to report that the chief eunuch had arrived again to deliver something. I thought for a moment and went out to look for him. I casually inquired about the maid who had caused the trouble. The chief eunuch snorted coldly. "That one has no eyes and no sense, serving in front of His Majesty. She actually dared to harbor ulterior motives. She works for the one in Fengqi Palace. Does she really think His Majesty doesn't know?" "Oh, I see." The palace maid was bribed by the Empress Dowager and became her spy planted beside His Majesty. That was her own undoing. After seeing off the chief eunuch, I ordered the pleading palace maid to be sent away. I cannot help with this, serving in the palace. The most important and fundamental thing is nothing but loyalty. If she can't even manage that, who can save her? Moreover, I'm not even sure how safe I am myself, but through this incident, I also learned that the tension between Yuan Yu and the current Empress Dowager is not without reason. Rumors in the palace suggest that there's more to the story of Noble Consort Chi's suicide in the cold palace. When Yuan Yu came in the evening, he noticed my absent-mindedness. He followed my gaze, and saw the faint bloodstain on his robe. He subtly covered it up and pushed the pastries on the table toward me. "Freshly made by the imperial kitchen. Try them." My attention was drawn to the exquisitely crafted pastries. They looked a bit like longevity cakes, but with 2 extra layers, adorned with vibrant carved decorations. As I was examining them, a sudden loud noise erupted in the sky. I was startled and looked up. Fireworks bloomed brilliantly in the sky. "If I remember correctly, today is your birthday," he said. "I haven't seen the birthday cake you once described, but based on your words, I had the imperial kitchen try to make one." I froze, my fingers on the table curling slightly. Birthday. I had almost forgotten myself, surviving and struggling through 2 different worlds. Who would still remember such days? But he remembered. He remembered the birthday cake I had casually mentioned years ago in the cold palace. While sharing a steamed bun with him and chattering about my hometown, fireworks were still blooming one after another in the night sky, their dazzling brilliance illuminating his deep eyes, in which there seemed to be a kind of cautious tenderness I had never seen before. A sudden bitterness rushed up to my nose, and my eyes instantly grew hot. I hurriedly lowered my head and took a big bite of that so-called cake. The texture was strange, not as soft as a cake should be, overly sweet to the point of cloying, and the decorative patterns, probably made of sugar, were so hard they hurt my teeth. It looks good, but it doesn't taste good at all. But I still ate it all, bite by bite. Earnestly, my throat ached from the cloying sweetness and an inexplicable emotion. Thank you. My voice was a bit hoarse. It was delicious. Yuan Yu looked at me, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. He handed me a handkerchief, and meeting my bewildered gaze, he pointed to the corner of his own mouth. I quickly took it and wiped my mouth a few times carelessly. My cheeks felt a little warm. After I finished wiping, Yuan Yu slowly stood up, his tone returning to calm. Finished eating. Then come with me to a place. I hadn't fully detached from the earlier emotions and instinctively rose to follow him. He didn't bring any attendants, only carrying a palace lantern as he led me along increasingly remote palace paths. The surrounding air gradually grew chilly and damp, tinged with a faint, elusive scent of rust and decay. My heart skipped a beat, and I faintly guessed where we were headed. Eventually, we stopped before a heavy iron door, the jailer guarding the door. Upon seeing him, silently knelt in salute and quickly opened it. A gloomy, dimly lit dungeon passage appeared before our eyes. Yuan Yu's steps did not pause as he walked straight toward the innermost cell. He signaled the jailer to open the cell door. A thick stench of blood and filth rushed at me, churning my stomach, and I instinctively covered my nose and mouth. In the corner of the cell, a dark shadow stirred. That could hardly be called a person anymore. Her clothes were in tatters, her body covered in grime and bloodstains, her hair matted and stuck to her face, with barely a patch of unblemished skin visible. She lay there like a heap of mud, only the faint rise and fall of her chest proving she was still alive. Hearing the noise, she slowly and painfully lifted her head. Beneath the disheveled hair, a swollen and distorted face was revealed, yet its outline was still faintly recognizable. It was Duan Yuan. Her eyes were initially hollow and numb, but upon recognizing me, that emptiness was instantly replaced by extreme fear and despair. She seemed to see a lifeline, yet also like she was staring at death itself. A hoarse, wheezing sound, like a broken bellows, escaped her throat. Struggling to crawl toward me, she was hindered by heavy shackles, and could only futilely stretch out a filthy, swollen hand with nails torn and twisted. Song Wu. Her voice was so hoarse it was almost inaudible, filled with bloody froth. Kill me, please, kill me, let me die. It's my fault, I shouldn't have bullied you, I deserve to die, I beg you, kill me, she pleaded repeatedly, using the last of her strength. I stood there, my hands and feet icy cold. Yuan Yu stood by my side, his voice calm and steady as if discussing the weather. However she bullied you back then, I have had it returned to her tenfold, 100-fold. I was stunned. How did you know? The first court lady. What was her name? He thought for a moment. Jiang Minute. She wasn't hard to intimidate. A simple question was all it took to get everything out of her. So he knows everything about my past. So he spared Duan Yuan's life, to let me take revenge with my own hands. He turned his head to look at me. In the dim light, the outline of his profile appeared somewhat cold and hard. Now, he paused, his tone even bordering on gentleness. Tell me, how do you wish to deal with her? Keep her alive, or, his words trailed off, but the implication was unmistakable. Duan Yuan's pleas grew more desperate and shrill. She kowtowed frantically, her forehead striking the cold, filthy ground with dull, heavy thuds. Kill me, Song Wu, give me a quick death, I beg you. I know I was wrong, I truly know I was wrong. I looked at her, watching this bully who once stood so high above, trampling me into the mud, toying with my life at will, not even sparing me at graduation, watching her now, writhing and begging on the ground like a maggot, pleading only for death. There was no imagined satisfaction in my heart, nor any pity, only a vast, icy emptiness and absurdity. I remained silent for a long time, The dungeon was left with nothing but Duan Yuan's desperate sobs and the clanking of shackles. Finally, I lifted my head and looked at Yuan Yu, my voice dry and calm. Let her die. Yuan Yu didn't seem surprised, just nodded faintly, as if I had merely decided to step on an ant. He didn't even glance at the jailer beside him, only raised his finger ever so slightly. The jailer understood immediately and stepped forward expressionlessly. At this moment, a glimmer of something almost grateful, almost liberated, flashed in Duan Yuan's eyes. I didn't look any longer. Turning around and walking out of the cell, behind me came an extremely brief, muffled sound, as if something had been forcibly cut off, followed by the final, crisp clatter of chains hitting the ground. Then, everything fell into dead silence. Stepping out of the dungeon, the cold night wind rushed at my face. I took a sharp breath, yet my chest still felt suffocatingly tight. Yuan Yu followed behind me and handed the dim palace lantern into my hand. "Revenge has been served, aren't you happy?" he asked, a trace of confusion in his tone. I watched the flickering flame of the lantern and, after a long while, gently shook my head. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I just feel it's meaningless." He fell silent for a moment, then suddenly raised his hand and, with utmost naturalness, used his fingertip to wipe away a cold tear that had unknowingly slipped down my cheek. "Then don't think about it." His movement was gentle, his fingertip carrying a hint of the night breeze's chill. "From now on, with me here, I won't let anyone bully you again." His voice was calm, yet carried an undeniable force. I looked up at him. The soft glow of the palace lanterns smoothed his overly sharp features. In those eyes, usually filled with gloom and unpredictability, now reflected a small version of me and a faint glimmer of light. My heart, amidst all the chaos and bloodshed, suddenly and uncontrollably skipped a fierce beat. This person is a tyrant feared by all. This person has committed countless evils and killed without mercy. Yet, he is also the only one who remembers my birthday. He makes a cake for me, someone who remembers the suffering I've endured and still wants to help me get justice. But since he treats me well, I want to treat him well in return. At this moment, a thought suddenly surged in my heart, a terrifying thought. If he is destined to meet a tragic end, then, in what remains of his relatively peaceful life, I want to stay by his side until the very end, and descend with him into the 18th level of hell. I am a selfish person, never a saint. In the second year of becoming Lady Song, the Empress Dowager finally couldn't hold back and sought me out. She ordered her attendants to lead me to the Lake Heart Pavilion. The Lake Heart Pavilion is surrounded by water on all sides, connected only by a winding corridor, making it an extremely secluded and convenient place for conversation. The Empress Dowager was not dressed in elaborate court attire, but rather in simple, elegant everyday clothing, with a plain jade hairpin in her hair. She dismissed her attendants, leaving only the two of us in the pavilion. "Lady Song, are you accustomed to life in the palace?" she began, her voice gentle and filled with concern. "I have heard that His Majesty treats you rather differently." I lowered my eyes and replied cautiously, "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty, everything is well." The Empress Dowager sighed softly, a sigh filled with helplessness and pity. "Child, there is no need to force a facade in front of me. Within these palace walls, who does not know the Emperor's temperament? His special treatment of you may not be a blessing. I have heard that all the attendants by your side were personally chosen by His Majesty, and every move you make is under his control. How is it any different from imprisonment?" I blinked my eyes and said nothing. She was right. The moon-embracing palace may appear glorious, but in reality, it was filled with Yuan Yu spies everywhere. I enjoyed the protection and special treatment he gave me, but naturally, I also lived under constant surveillance. But I didn't care. "I cannot bear to see you, so young, trapped and withering away in this gilded cage." The Empress Dowager's voice lowered even further, carrying a mesmerizing power. "If you wish to leave, I can help you." I was taken aback for a moment and looked up at her. The Empress Dowager's gaze was affectionate and sincere, as if she were truly just an elder who cared deeply for her junior, but I didn't miss the fleeting glint of shrewdness and calculation deep in her eyes. How could a woman who had stood firm in the late Emperor's harem and risen to become Empress Dowager risk helping an emperor's favorite consort escape merely out of compassion? This is highly unusual. Why would your majesty the Empress Dowager help me? I asked directly. My gaze fixed intently on her expression. The Empress Dowager seemed to have anticipated my question, her face revealing a mix of sorrow and fear, as if recalling something utterly terrifying. Because His Majesty is not as simple as the world sees him. Her voice trembled slightly, and her body seemed to shake with fear. He is a devil. She took a deep breath, as if having made a great resolve, leaned close to me, and whispered in a tone almost only the two of us could hear. Do you think Lady Qi really died by accident? No, she did not. My heart suddenly raced. Back then, it was Yuan Yu. It was he who personally set the fire that killed his own birth mother, Lady Qi. My pupils contracted sharply as I stared at her in disbelief. Tears welled in the Empress Dowager's eyes, yet they carried a bone-chilling coldness. He used this matter to win the late Emperor's sympathy and pity, then deliberately feigned illness in bed to lure the late Emperor into visiting. That was how he accidentally came across the flood control strategy that he had long prepared and placed on his desk. From then on, he truly entered the late Emperor's sight, step by step, until he reached the position he holds today. Her words were like an icy awl, piercing sharply into my mind. The Empress Dowager carefully observed my reaction. Seeing my face turn deathly pale, clearly shaken to the core, she continued with satisfaction. What wouldn't such a person, who could heartlessly kill his own birth mother, be capable of? Back then, when he murdered his mother, he was witnessed by a palace maid named Ashu. He cruelly silenced her as well. He was only 17 at the time, yet his hands were already stained with blood. I was taken aback for a moment, looking at her with some surprise. At this point, it became clear that she was lying. Child, if you stay by his side, you may be favored today, but tomorrow you could be shattered to pieces. I truly cannot bear to see such a tragedy repeat itself. As she spoke, she took out a small white jade porcelain bottle from her sleeve and pressed it into my cold hand. The medicine in this bottle is colorless and odorless. Just a small amount added to his tea will plunge him into a deep slumber, and he won't wake for at least 6 hours. She tightly grasped my hand, her tone urgent and sincere. Only while he is unconscious will you have the chance to take the waste token he carries, which grants access through the palace gates. The people I've arranged will be waiting outside to escort you away from this place of trouble. Your Majesty, I need to think. My voice trembled, betraying my utter confusion. The Empress Dowager nodded indulgently, patting the back of my hand. Good child, I know this is sudden. Go back and think it over carefully. But remember, opportunities are fleeting. Make your decisions soon, for the sake of your own life. With that, she said no more, turning and slowly leaving the lakeside pavilion. Alone in the pavilion, the lake breeze blew, yet it couldn't disperse the chill and confusion in my heart. The white jade porcelain vial in my hand felt like a branding iron, burning my palm with pain. I had a dream. I dreamt of the 3rd year after I first crossed over to this place. I was startled awake by a wild cat in the night and found that outside, thunder and lightning raged, and a storm was about to break. I thought of Xiao Yuzi, who once said his house leaked when it rained. Worried he might get drenched and fall ill, I got up to look for him, intending to let him stay at my place for the night. Arriving at Suiling Pavilion, I saw flames soaring into the sky. A dark figure stumbled toward me, pursued by many Imperial guards. I was all too familiar with Yuan Yu, so familiar that I recognized his silhouette at a glance. I didn't know what crime he had committed, but my only instinct was to save my only friend here, so I pushed him. Run that way, while I led a portion of the Imperial guards in the opposite direction. That night, I ran until I had no strength left. In the end, an arrow struck my calf, and I fell into the lotus pond beside me. No one came to save me. The Imperial guards, realizing they had chased the wrong person, turned around. I sank slowly to the bottom of the pond. When I opened my eyes again, I had crossed back to my own world. I woke up from a dream. I couldn't fall back asleep after that. The Empress Dowager said that Ashu was silenced by Yuan Yu, but how could I not know how I died? As for the rest of her words, I couldn't tell what was true or false. Just as dawn was breaking, the door was gently pushed open. Someone came in, bringing a chill with them. I slowly opened my eyes and watched Yuan Yu standing by the candlelight, warming his hands until they were toasty before quietly turning around. The dim light kept him from noticing I was awake. He gently lifted a corner of my blanket and was about to climb in when he looked up and met my gaze. Even the emperor, who never showed his emotions, actually revealed a look of embarrassment. It lasted only a moment before he regained his composure. He slipped into my quilt with utmost naturalness. I've been reviewing memorials all night and am a bit tired, so I came here to rest. Does your hall of mental cultivation not have a bed? I couldn't sleep, it's too empty. He moved closer to me, placing his hand on my waist. Aishu, it's warm here. No wonder I felt so cramped while sleeping at night a few days ago. Judging by Yuan Yu's familiarity, he must have sneaked in here countless times without me knowing. He did look very tired. So I didn't say anything more and just let him hold me like that, but he didn't fall asleep either. Ashu, you have something on your mind. So certain. I hesitated for a long time, and finally couldn't help but sit up. I want to ask you something. Yuan Yu closed his eyes. Ask, how did Consort Qi die back then? Yuan Yu remained silent for a long time, his hand resting on my waist unmoving. Just as I thought he had fallen asleep, I heard him speak. Mother took her own life that night. She suddenly regained consciousness and set the curtains ablaze with a candle. I tried to save her, but she refused to come out with me. Every time Yuan Yu closed his eyes, he could vividly recall the scene from that year. His mother stood amidst a sea of flames. On his face was a peaceful smile I hadn't seen in a long time. She said she was free. She said she could finally escape this palace that devours people. Yuan Yu gently rested his forehead on my shoulder. Aishu, what did the Empress Dowager say to you? I wasn't surprised that he knew I had met the Empress Dowager. After all, I hadn't intended to hide it from him. She said she could help me leave. Do you want to leave? No. Yuan Yu was taken aback. Why? Because no one cares about me except you. Yuan Yu curled his lips. I am still the emperor, still holding power. If you wish, I can search for all the talented and extraordinary individuals to send you back to your own world. Even so, you still don't want to leave. I fell silent. Yuan Yu's hand, resting on my waist, gradually withdrew. The next second, I burrowed under the covers, turned over, and embraced him in return. Yuan Yu, I've been an orphan since I was a child. I grew up and studied with the help of sponsors. The world I lived in claimed that everyone was equal, yet in reality, everyone was unequal. Even there, I was looked down upon and bullied. There's nothing I can't bear to part with, but here, I find it hard to part with you. Little Yuzi protected me back then, and now your majesty protects me too. I'm not an ungrateful person. I know who treats me well. I sniffled and rubbed my face against his arm. So, don't send me away. Yuan Yu's body stiffened slightly. He slowly raised his hand and gently patted my head. His voice sounded a bit strained. I can protect you, but Aishu, is there anything you can offer me in return? I thought for a moment and said solemnly, I'll share half of my bed in the moon-embracing palace with you from now on. Yuan Yu smiled. All right, that's enough. Yuan Yu had a pleasant scent. I breathed in that scent and soon fell into a deep sleep. In a daze, a warmth was felt on the forehead. It seemed as if a soft sigh was heard again. Aishu, remember to wait for me. Upon waking, the daylight was bright, and I was in a carriage, leaving the city. It took me a long moment to process what was happening before I flung open the carriage curtain and saw the coachman's face. The chief eunuch was driving the carriage. Your Highness is awake. Please get back inside quickly. Don't fall. I gripped the edge of the carriage window tightly, my fingertips turning white from the force. Where is this? I want to go back. The chief eunuch didn't turn around, only slightly tilting his face. Your Highness, His Majesty has given orders to escort you out of the city to a safe place. Safety? What exactly is happening in the palace? My heart was pounding fiercely, a sense of foreboding gripping me tightly. His Majesty was perfectly fine last night. The carriage continued at an undiminished speed. Jolting along the dirt road outside the palace, the chief eunuch fell silent for a moment, then finally sighed, his voice lowered as if afraid the wind might overhear. Your Highness, the palace is about to face a storm. The grievances between the Empress Dowager and His Majesty run deep, and now it has come to the point where the dagger is drawn. If you remain in the palace, His Majesty will inevitably be distracted, and the Empress Dowager will surely use you as a pawn when that time comes. With blades and swords having no eyes, His Majesty may not be able to protect your safety. My heart felt as if it were being gripped by an icy hand. Grievances. Because of noble consort Chi's death. The chief eunuch shook his head, a trace of complex mockery on his face. Noble consort Chi's death is merely the tip of the iceberg, Your Highness. Do you know why the Empress Dowager fears His Majesty so much, and why she has been scheming relentlessly to eliminate him? He paused. As if organizing his words, Her Majesty the Empress Dowager, she appears benevolent and dignified, a motherly figure to the nation. But within these palace walls, whose hands are truly clean, his voice was filled with deep disgust. Back then, before noble consort Chi entered the palace, she had a fiancé in her hometown in Jiangnan whom she was deeply in love with. They grew up together and were just waiting for their wedding day. I held my breath, but during a southern tour, the late emperor happened to catch sight of noble consort Chi's beauty and was utterly captivated, immediately deciding to take her into the palace. The empress at the time, who is now the Empress Dowager, saw the late emperor's desire and, to build her reputation as magnanimous and proactive in sharing the emperor's burdens, personally intervened. She used both threats and incentives against the Chi family. The chief eunuch's voice turned cold, although the Chi family were minor officials. They were known for their integrity. At first, they were unwilling to let their daughter become a consort and even more reluctant to break the engagement. It was the Empress Dowager. She promised them high positions and wealth, then threatened the future of their entire clan. In the end, it was the Empress Dowager herself who personally delivered noble consort Chi to the late emperor's bed. A chill ran through my entire body, but that wasn't enough. The chief eunuch's tone grew even colder. After Lady Chi entered the palace, her beauty and temperament did win the late emperor's favor for a time, and the Empress Dowager couldn't sit still again. How could she tolerate anyone threatening her position? So she secretly schemed, framed Lady Chi, and made her offend the emperor, ultimately leading to her being confined to the cold palace, where she lived out her days in depression. I thought of Yuan Yu's casual remark last night, my mother took her own life. I thought about the depth of despair behind that fire, enough to make a mother choose to leave her child in such a way. The seemingly compassionate Empress Dowager is the mastermind behind all this misfortune. His Majesty knew about this since he was a child. My voice trembled slightly. His Majesty is intelligent and grew up in the cold palace, witnessing the harshness of the world and the deceitfulness of human hearts. He vaguely uncovered the truth when he was very young. The chief eunuch sighed and said, over the years, His Majesty and the Empress Dowager have appeared to be a loving mother and a filial son on the surface, but in reality, they have long been at odds like fire and water. The Empress Dowager's maternal family is powerful, with deep-rooted connections, and has controlled the court for many years. After His Majesty ascended the throne, he bided his time, quietly laying out his plans, secretly gathering evidence of their crimes, and removing their allies. He paused, his voice tinged with a hint of helplessness and resentment. How could the Empress Dowager's clan?
Now, there would have been chaos and war long ago. The cellar fell silent instantly, and everyone turned their gaze toward me in surprise. Miss, how do you know? The aunt's voice was filled with doubt. I choked up, unable to explain my relationship with Yuan Yu, and could only stubbornly repeat, I just know. He's not what you think he is. The sounds from outside grew clearer. The hoofbeats seemed to tread right over the cellar, shaking the earth and causing dirt to fall in a steady stream. The sounds of shouting and killing, along with screams, were incessant. I hugged my knees tightly, burying my face in them, my body trembling uncontrollably. It had started raining at some point. Yuan Yu, where are you? Are you safe? You must not be in any danger. You told me to wait for you. I prayed over and over in my heart, fear and worry winding around it like vines, tightening with every moment. This night felt as long as a century. We hid in the cellar, trembling with fear, until daybreak. The noises outside gradually subsided, leaving only a deathly silence, occasionally punctuated by one or two scattered cries. After waiting for a long while, and confirming that it seemed truly safe outside, the butler cautiously pushed open the cellar door. The blinding sunlight streamed in, and everyone squinted their eyes. We helped each other climb out of the cellar. The sight before us made everyone gasp in shock. The street outside the village was in complete disarray, littered with broken weapons, tattered flags, and dark red, dried bloodstains. The air was thick with the heavy smell of blood and the acrid scent of burning. The surviving commoners, their faces ashen and eyes hollow, searched for something amidst the ruins. At that moment, a squad of soldiers wearing different styles of armor ran past, shouting loudly as they went, "Her Majesty the Empress Dowager has passed away. His Majesty has also passed away. The rebels have been quelled by Princeton. Everyone, return to your homes and refrain from making noise outside." This news struck my ears like a clap of thunder. The Empress Dowager, His Majesty, passed away. Yuan Yu is dead. No, impossible. I staggered, almost losing my balance, but fortunately, the aunt next to me caught me. "Miss, are you all right?" I could hear nothing. The sounds of the whole world fading away from me. Tears surged without warning, blurring my vision. He's dead. That Yuan Yu, who would bake cakes for me, remember my birthday, clumsily comfort me, and sneak into my bed saying, "It's warm here," is dead. He said that from now on, with him around, no one would ever bully me again. He said, "Aishu, remember to wait for me." Did he break his promise? Overwhelmed by immense grief, I pushed the woman aside and walked forward, utterly distraught. I don't remember how I made it back to that small courtyard. I shut myself in the room for a full day and night. On the morning of the third day, I pushed open the door. I found an old piece of clothing that Yuan Yu had once left at my place, on the hillside behind the courtyard. I dug into the soil bit by bit with my hands and built a cenotaph for him. There was no tombstone. I only found a rough wooden board, but I didn't know what to write on it. Finally, I just knelt before that small mound of earth, tears falling drop by drop into the soil. "Yuan Yu, you liar." My voice was hoarse, choked with tears. "You said you wouldn't lie to me. You told me to wait for you. Liar, liar." A great sorrow and emptiness consumed me, and I collapsed onto that cold mound of earth, weeping uncontrollably. The next moment, a familiar voice, tinged with a hint of helplessness and the faintest trace of amusement, sounded behind me. "When have I ever lied to you?" My sobbing came to an abrupt halt. He stood as if frozen by a spell, completely motionless. I didn't even dare to look back, afraid that it was just a hallucination born of my overwhelming grief, until a pair of warm hands gently held my shoulders from behind and turned me around. The morning light fell upon him, outlining his clear and familiar silhouette. Yuan Yu stood right in front of me, dressed in plain coarse clothing with even a bit of dirt on his face, but his eyes were strikingly bright. It holds a subtle smile and a barely noticeable weariness. My eyes widened in disbelief as I stared at him, my lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. He raised his hand and gently wiped the tears from my face with his fingertips. His touch tender. "It was just a play to fake death and escape," he explained in a low voice, his tone as casual as if he were talking about a trivial matter. "The Empress Dowager and her power-wielding brothers and nephews were all dealt with last night. It's just that the commotion was a bit too loud and must have frightened you." He paused, glanced at the simple makeshift grave, and the corner of his mouth lifted. "You really went through the trouble of setting up a grave for me." I suddenly snapped back to reality, a mix of immense joy and lingering fear washing over me, making me unable to resist raising my hand to hit him. You jerk." I almost thought I really lost him. That heart-wrenching pain still sends chills down my spine whenever I think about it. He let me hit him, then gently pulled me into his embrace. His embrace carried the slight chill of the night dew. "All right, it's over now," he whispered in my ear, his voice steady and reassuring. "The Empress Dowager's faction has been severely weakened. The remaining small fry will be taken care of by Princeton." I lifted my head from his embrace, looking at him through tear-filled eyes. "Princeton, yes," Yuan Yu nodded, his gaze fixed in the direction of the imperial city, his tone calm. "He is from the lineage of the royal uncle, intelligent and upright, with a deep concern for the people. In his early years, dissatisfied with the dominance of the Empress Dowager's clan, he voluntarily went to his fiefdom. The throne suits him better than it does me." He withdrew his gaze, looked down at me, his eyes filled with a sense of relief and a faint longing. "Ashu, I am not a good emperor. My methods are ruthless. I have made too many enemies. Staying would bring no good to the country or its people. This way, it's for the best." He held me gently, as if embracing a treasure that had been lost and found again. "From now on, I am no longer the emperor, just Yuan Yu. You said you would share half of your bed with me. Does that offer still stand?" I looked at him, at this man who had shed his imperial aura, yet whose eyes shone brighter than ever before. I nodded firmly and held him tightly in return. "It stands, it will always stand." Postscript, a few days later. An inconspicuous blue-canopied carriage quietly departed from the estate on the outskirts of the capital. Yuan Yu had changed his name and was now called Yuan Yu. He and I along with the chief eunuch disguised as an old servant, now to be called Steward Yuan, set off together on the journey south. After a long and tiring journey, my mood was unexpectedly light. Yuan Yu had shed all his burdens, as if he were truly just an ordinary husband accompanying his wife on a trip. The water towns of Jiangnan were indeed as picturesque as a painting. Our new home was situated by a tranquil lake, with white walls and dark tiles, and a deep, secluded courtyard. Yuan Yu had everything prepared long ago. The residence was spacious and elegant, with a modest number of servants who were all well-mannered and dutiful, addressing us respectfully as master and mistress. Steward Yuan managed everything in perfect order. He seemed born to be a great steward, stern yet shrewd, handling both internal and external affairs with seamless efficiency. Yuan Yu smiled much more often than before. The days were peaceful and fulfilling. Sometimes he would read in the study for the entire afternoon. Sometimes he would take me for a walk in the courtyard, pointing at the newly transplanted flowers and plants, proudly showing them off to me. More often than not, he would simply keep me company, better than before. He always says this with a smile in his eyes. We stroll through the market like the most ordinary couple in the world. We also share an oil paper umbrella in the drizzling rain, walking slowly along the bluestone paved road. Listening to the faint, soft Wu dialect drifting from afar. No one knows who we are. The neighbors simply think we are a young couple named Yuan who just moved in, with a wealthy family background, deep affection, and a perfect match of talent and beauty. They truly are a well-suited couple. Occasionally, news from the capital could be heard from passing merchants or newly arrived court bulletins. Prince successfully ascended the throne, changing the era name to Yongjing. The new emperor was diligent in governance and cared for the people, vigorously eliminating the accumulated malpractices of the previous dynasty. The remnants of the Empress Dowager's faction were gradually purged, bringing a renewed atmosphere to both the court and the public. The common people all praised the new emperor for his benevolence, while occasionally mentioning the assassinated tyrannical former emperor, often with sighs or fear in their words, but gradually. No one delved deeper into the matter. At such times, Yuan Yu would always listen, his expression calm and unruffled, as if it were truly a story from another world, another person's life. Only once, I woke in the night to find him not by my side. I went out to look for him and saw him standing alone in the courtyard, hands behind his back, gazing at the northern stars, his figure appearing somewhat lonely. I walked over quietly, wrapped my arms around his waist from behind, and pressed my face against his broad back. He paused slightly, then relaxed, covering my hand that was wrapped around his waist. It's all in the past, I said softly. He responded in a low voice, turning around to embrace me, his chin gently resting on the top of my head. I just think about it sometimes. But now, like this, it's good. His voice carried a sense of relief and contentment. Yes, very good. No schemes or plots, no bloodshed or killing. Steward Yuan would sometimes watch us. Watching his master clumsily trying to pin a flower in his wife's hair, watching the wife, without any regard for decorum, pulling the master into the courtyard to taste her newly made, strange and peculiar pastries. On his always stern face, a faint, almost imperceptible smile would occasionally appear. The once gloomy and restrained youth from the cold palace, the tyrant feared by all in the court, had finally found his only refuge and peace in this misty, rainy region south of the Yangtze River. The end.